traveling to the most exciting sites, the Outdoor World team has been asking one and the same question. What is environmental tourism? Different phrasing gives us a relatively similar gist. Environmental tourism is a type of tourism which contributes to wildlife conservation. Everyone agrees that tourism should help preserving nature, yet some emphasize environmental education and awareness raising, while others focus on building up the economic incentives among local communities. The controversy of what is primary being or consciousness is at least 1,000 years old. The famous Raphael's painting The School of Athens depicts an idealist philosopher Plato with his hand pointing up to the heavens and a materialist Aristotle pointing his hand down at the ground. Whereas the former believed that everything material depended on spiritual, Aristotle, on the contrary, was convinced that it was vice versa. The modern philosophy of ecotourism does not contrast these two aspects of human existence. On the one hand, traveling in the wild should foster public development and education. On the other hand, environmental tourism makes conservation cost-efficient for local communities. Tourists pay money, and this money, if properly distributed, should motivate local residents to preserve landscapes and increase the number of wild animals. Today we will get acquainted with one of the most popular ecotourism locations in Almaty region, the famous Sharyn Canyon, and we'll follow the river from source to mouth. We are beginning our trip in the administrative center of Uyghur district, the village of Shonji. It's about 4 hours from Almaty to here.
Сегодня в экспедиции Амина.
Today in the expedition team we have Amina Muratova and Baljan Baltasheva, both experienced travelers, although mainly to warm seas. Yet this time they decided to do some ecotourism, and I recommended them starting with the Sharyn National Park. Firstly, it's not very far from Almaty, and secondly, there's no other place like it. You can get the first impressions of the Sharyn Nature Park's fauna right near its guest center. Amina and Baljan have never seen jayrans, the only gazelle genus species living in Kazakhstan. Baljan, look, it's a jayran. No, it's just a roe deer. Why do you think so? Jayran's horns are similar to these of antelope. Have you ever seen one yourself? Yes, sure. Where? In cartoons and movies. That one is a jayran for sure. Definitely a jayran. I recognized it. Do you see its horns? What is the difference between a jayran and a roe deer? Jayrans are gazelles, roe deer are deer, hence the different horns or antlers. This is the guest house. You can spend the night here and see only plastic animals. If you want to see real ones, you will need to sleep in a tent. I'm not interested in the plastic ones. A tent be it. Arsen Nurgaliyev, head of the Animal World Protection and Reproduction Department, and State Inspector Kazbek Koyshibayev will guide us through the natural riches of the Sharyn Park. The park was established in 2004 on the junction of 3 administrative units, Yenbekshi Kazakh, Kyrgyz and Uyghur districts. Its total area is 93,000 hectares, including the conservation and environmental stabilization zones, as well as touristic and recreational, limited economic activity and protection zones. Another 20 minutes and we're entering the national park's premises. Its border crosses the rocky rubble desert in the Ili Valley center. It's only about 30 kilometers from Shonji to the Sharyn River in the Satogai area. Another half hour and we are already on the Sharyn banks. A highway stretches along the river, which is a popular tourist route. Yet forget about turning off of it into the desert, as the park's conservation zone starts there. Is it possible to encounter Jayrans and Teke in the same place? Yes, in the Mintogai Gorge. This is where they live. Are these their tracks? Yes, indeed. And on this side, in the steppe part, we have Jayrans. The Sharyn Canyon is a place to see the mountain goats Teke. Perhaps a small group of them live here permanently, and beyond any shadow of doubt it is connected with the main population inhabiting the large Boguti Mountains. In fact, they are 15 kilometers to the west. The Boguti Mountains also belong to the park's protection area. In spring and summer, female ibexes with fawns and young males stay here, and closer to autumn, during mating, large adult stags join them. In winter, ibexes form large mixed herds.
Подскажите, тут есть туристические тропы?
Are there any hiking trails here? Yes. And we have them marked in our map. One of them goes from Timir Lake down to Satagoy.
Туристические тропы.
The road snakes along the canyon's edge and a few kilometers later descends into the Uzunbulak area. No vehicle can reach the actual Charion bank. A 1-kilometer walk is a piece of cake. The tourist route in Uzunbulak is not as crowded as the one in the famous Valley of Castles, but it is no less beautiful. The conservation principle in national parks around the world is based on the fact that recreation zones are adjacent to protected areas. A smaller part of a park's premises, about 10 to 15%, is open to tourists, and the large one is left to wild animals. After decades of robust protection, animals get used to the invisible border between their habitats and tourist trails and stop paying attention to humans. You can observe them from special observation platforms. Unlike the US one, Kazakhstan's national parks are still very young and our animals are still afraid of tourists. As the domestic conservation efforts evolve, the situation should change for the better.
А много туристов приезжает?
Do many tourists come here? In fact, yes. April, May through November is the hot season.
До ноября.
People have lived on the Sharyn banks from the Upper Paleolithic. It's difficult for an unprepared eye to notice the ancient human traces, but looking carefully, you can find many artifacts of the long-past eras. By the way, this stone looks like an axe. It's hard saying no to a nice walk around the picturesque canyons, coming closer to the river and even having a dip in its refreshing water. Yet caution is necessary. In its middle reaches, Sharyn is quite rough and limestone, gypsum, clay and moss are quite fragile. At any moment, a stone under the foot can crush and slip under. A whole rock can do the same. Walking is recommended only along pre-laid trails. For millions of years, sedimentary rocks had accumulated accumulated at the bottom of the Pleistocene Ili Sea. The climate was tropical with corresponding flora and fauna like crocodiles and giant mammals, the bones of which paleontologists are now discovering in the exposed geological layers of the Sharyn Canyon. About 12 million years ago, the sea went away and its bottom rose simultaneously with the ridges of the northern and central Tian Shan. The water flowing down from the mountains had cut this deep canyon in the seabed. For tourists, it is an open-air museum where everyone can personally see the best images illustrating the global geological history. Not without reason, students from universities around the world come here for field studies. There are not so many places on Earth where on one and the same slope you can encounter the remains of Jurassic dinosaurs that used to live here hundreds of millions of years ago and the bone remains of the Pleistocene megafauna, woolly rhinos and saber-toothed cats. The multi-colored limestone layers of the Sharyn Canyon resemble a geochronological table. Every layer represents a whole era. Here you can find the tools of the Stone Age that had apparently finished in this region in the 4th millennium BC, the burials of the Bronze Age, the mounds of the early Iron Age, as well as medieval monuments and graves of extreme tourists who died canoeing through the stormy Sharyn Rapids.
Скажите еще, какие животные в этих местах?
Tell us what other animals live in these ends.
Животные. Здесь у нас есть рысь, но она редко
We also have lynxes, although not too many.
по этим ущельям.
Take care.
Ну, мы здесь один раз видел.
And snow leopards.
Да, барса видели здесь.
Desert-type mountains are not typical snow leopard habitats, but they, as humans, love to travel. Sometimes they encounter them in completely unusual places. The explanation may be that the instinct drives predators to new places to avoid genetic isolation. The Sharyn and Jibek rivers are the largest Ili tributaries in Kazakhstan. They feed the Ili Balkhash watershed as well as support the irrigated agriculture in the Ili Valley, as well as supply water to villages and communities in the south of Almaty region. Powerful in their mountainous section, they give away most of their water for household needs and in the lower reaches turn into small and calm rivers. The Sharyn River forms by the confluence of rivers and streams flowing down from the Teriskay and Katpeny-Alatau ranges. It has three main tributaries: Karkara, Shalkodesu and Timelik. Its right bank tributary, Karkara, originates in the Teriskay-Alatau glaciers in the vicinity of the Kantengri Peak. In the mountain tundra belt, everything is saturated with moisture. High mountain marshes, Sazi, accumulate water and feed thousands of streams merging into larger streams. The border between Kazakhstan and Kyrgyzstan runs along the Karkara. The river enters the intermountain plain close to the village of Kayaking and changes its name also to Kayaking. In 2011, the construction of Moynak hydropower plant was completed on the river. Below the HPP, the river continues its course under the name of Charion. The Shalko-de-Su River is the largest Sharyn's left bank tributary. It flows through the valley of the same name, which has been famous for its lush pastures since ancient times. Shalko-de-Su alpine meadows, or Zhailao in Kazakh, look as picturesque as they did hundreds of years ago. Local livestock farmers are still doing what their ancestors did, which attracts numerous tourists willing to experience the traditional Kazakh culture. Mentally removing cars and satellite dishes from the surrounding landscape, you can imagine yourself in the era of Abdullah Khan. Judging by the multiple mounds, people have appreciated the local natural riches from the Bronze and early Iron Ages. Sitting on top of an ancient mound, you can enjoy a traditional nomadic game thousands of years old. To someone, the Turkic national game, Kokpa, may seem too brutal, but you need to remember that it arose in the distant time when the nomadic people army had to protect their pastures from numerous invaders. In peacetime, this harsh game helped soldiers train their art of riding, endurance and agility. Kokpa is a team game and requires coercion, ability to quickly make collective decisions in extreme environment, and high level of organization to keep the mounted formation. Kokpa rules resemble these of horse polo, only instead of a ball, they use a goat's or a ram's body. Players must throw it at the opponent's goal. During the match, forcing tactics are allowed. From the Shalko-de-Su, you can quickly get into the upper reaches of another Sharyn's tributary, the Ili River. All you need to do is to cross the Katpen Ridge. The Ili originates in the Katpen Alatau mountain range and flows into Charion 10 kilometers above the valley of Castles. Descending from the ridge, the river cuts the desert hillocks like a knife, forming beautiful canyons. Fishing is prohibited on the park's premises, but outside its borders you can get some nice mountain trout or osman in Kazakh. We want to try our fishing luck. By the way, according to the World Trade Organization classification, fishing tourism is also considered eco-friendly. Every year, about 10 million people travel to other countries for sports fishing. Osman is no blue marlin, but fishing for it is no less exciting. Any fishing starts with setting up the camp. For a beginner, it's not an easy task. Maybe like that. We should have watched the corresponding YouTube video. I am not sure I can do it alone. I need help. Baljan comes to Amina's rescue. Two of them are doing much better. With the first task down, another even more difficult quest is awaiting them: catching the fish. I imagined it differently. Why do I have to do everything myself? While hiking, you have to do a lot of things all alone. but you still cannot do without the help of professionals. Our driver, Uncle Vitya, has already managed to install the camping kitchen and cook dinner. Amina, let's get some dinner. In fact, this is not a dinner but a light snack before some serious business. We are short on time as we only have evening and morning to enjoy fishing.
Вот я ловил сама.
Once I got a catfish weighing 106 kilograms. Mountain fishing, and specifically mountain trout fishing, is considered aristocratic. No fisherman can do without a bit of boasting. However, we need to stop talking and get down to business. To begin with, one needs to carefully inspect the surroundings, find suitable sites and think through the fishing route. Mountain fishing is similar to hunting. You need to walk a lot, search for fish and sneak up on it. Osmans are usually found in little ponds behind the rapids and wait for the current to carry out insects, aquatic arthropods and other food. After carefully exploring the area, we can start fishing. You can catch osmans on worms or small insects. You need to learn how to cast your line with bait so that the current drags it into the pond. Dexterity is an important prerequisite for successful fishing, but the lack of experience can be compensated with luck. 2 hours of casting practice and Amina has definitely earned herself a nice dinner. Amina's fish is bigger. She got 10 of them just during the morning. Not bad. Not bad at all. Amina is already an expert. It's hard to say how many amateur fishermen exactly live in Kazakhstan. Most likely this number is measured in hundreds of thousands, as it is one of the most popular outdoor activities.
На удочку можно ловить до 5 килограмм промысловых видов рыб.
You can catch up to 5 kilograms of commercial fish species per one fishing rod. Except for the spring ban period, which, if my memory serves me right, lasts from April the 15th to June the 6th, excluding the specially protected areas. In some national parks you can fish with a special permit, in some you cannot. Thus, if you doubt it being legal, it's better to avoid fishing in such locations and during spring spawning. Amateur fishing communities have their own code of ethics. One important rule is not to leave trash at camping sites. In addition, responsible fishermen also try assisting in combating poaching. After all, fish stock is not unlimited and you need to be careful about using it. I liked fishing very much. From now on, consider me a true mountain fishing fan. It's quite venturesome. Another quest is awaiting Amina. It's one thing catching a fish, and it's completely a different one cooking it right. Baljan, my recipe is this. Take fish, salt a bit, dip it in flour and deep fry it. I've never heard of this recipe. Did you come up with it on your own? A little less fire, please. It still looks raw to me. Raw? Yeah. A little more salt could help too. Get Maxim. Despite minor difficulties, the cooking show became a success. And now we are approaching the most important stage of any fishing. It's lunchtime. We have fried fish and fish soup. In fact, it all turned out quite delicious. Having rested on the shady river banks and successfully diversified the expedition diet, the Outdoor World team is heading to meet the park's staff. We agreed to meet each other again in the Saritogai at 10 a.m. They promised showing us some J-runs today. In places of mass J-run concentration, you can move only accompanied by park rangers. The expedition went into the steppe for only several kilometers and we saw the first pair of black-tailed gazelles. Filming them was not so easy. In the plain, animals notice a vehicle from afar and quickly run out of sight. However, in the 3 hours of the raid, we managed to count over 30 animals. Once there were many more of them here, but in the late 20th century, their numbers started shrinking catastrophically. The situation reversed only after setting up the national park. Whereas in the plain, it's impossible to drive up to a J-run at a distance of confident filming amongst desert hillocks, your chances are much higher. In addition, you get to know other desert residents like lizards and other small creatures. Lizard, of course, is no J-run, but will still be a nice addition to a photo hunter's collection. The sun-watcher lizard is quite common in the rocky rubble deserts of southern Kazakhstan. At times, they are so trusting that land photographers come really close. They are not large in size, 5 to 7 centimeters, but are very graphic. In Russian, sand lizard is called swift, and it's not without a reason. Despite its small size, you can barely follow it moving, and it cleverly hides in holes, shrubs and terrain cracks. Our hike through the hillocks yielded good results. We managed to sneak up really close to J-runs, although our operators are still not satisfied. During hot months, rocky desert heats up like a frying pan, and the haze rising from the ground makes you think J-runs are floating in the air. The only times to get a more or less sharp image is before 7 a.m. and after 8 p.m. Still, the Outdoor World team did see dozens of J-runs with their own eyes, and this is really good news. If I'm not mistaken, the last time I was here about 10 years ago. Our route back then was similar to the one we're following today, and we encountered only 4 J-runs as opposed to 30 today. Any thoughts on that? Before the establishment of the national park, the local J-run population was indeed rather small. Recently, it has been steadily growing. Are there any issues with poachers? Every once in a while. Did you get any lately? Yes. Last year we caught one, and in 2016 also. In addition to combating poaching, the national park conducts various biotechnical works, for example, building artificial drinking stations.
Қарақұйрықтардың мекені Шөлейтті, жартылай шөлейтті жер болған.
Artificial water sites played a major role in restoring the Charion population in arid conditions.
Паркінің күшімен 2014 жылы
Starting 2014, we have built 3 kilometers of drinking lines.
енді биыл
This year we plan to finish another 10 kilometers.
су тартылып беруде.
Breaking out of the Sharyn Canyon to the plain, the river changes its temper. Gradually it turns into a calm, inundated river lined with dense tugai woods. We are currently located below the Valley of Castles. Here the river leaves the canyon into the plain. This place is called the Ash Grove. Without exaggeration, it is a unique place because it consists of the relict soaked ash. Some of the trees in the grove are many hundreds of years old. Soaked ash is considered relict because they have found its remains in the early Pleistocene layers. In those days, the climate in the southeast of Kazakhstan was subtropical and ash grew among oleanders and magnolias. Since then, as a species, it has practically not changed, although undergone all climatic transformations. Now soaked ash is present only along Central Asian inundated rivers. We want to follow the Sharyn River from its source to the mouth, but it's impossible to drive up right to the river since its banks are overgrown with thick floodplain forest. Once upon a time, they were home to thousands of wild boars and roe deer. While in the desert, you can easily guess approaching the Sharyn's floodplain by the Asiatic poplar groves. The closer to the river, the more of them you see. Desert poplar is included in the Red Book, and setting the groves on fire and procuring turanga for firewood are criminal offenses. Since it's hard getting to the river bank by car, the Outer World team will use a kayak. There's enough place only for one operator in it. The rest of the team will try locating a vehicle road to the river's mouth. The plan is to meet up somewhere close to the mouth. The dry banks evidence the lower than usual water level in the Sharyn. The only way to get through the shallows and rapids is to drag the boat over. Maxim Zverev, a famous Kazakh naturalist writer, described the Sharyn's mouth in his stories. Once it was the land of unscared boars, roe deer and pheasants. You can still hear the morning and evening concerts delivered by the local avian species, but wild boars and roe deer are nowhere to be seen anymore. Yet the Tugai woods are as beautiful. Kayaking down the river, you can easily imagine yourself in the wild jungle of an exotic country. It takes 5 hours to get through the Sharyn's inundated part on a kayak. With filming, it will take about a day.
Вчера мы видели, насколько река Чарyn буйная.
Yesterday we saw how violent and fast the Sharyn is in its middle reaches, where it pierces through the famous Sharyn Canyon. Where it joins the Ili, it's quite calm and shallow, edged with gorgeous Tugai forests.
И воды сейчас в ней очень мало.
As you can see, in its lower reaches you can cross it not only on horseback, but also on foot. Finally, we've reached the Sharyn's mouth. It took some time for our operator to understand that he was already on the Ili.
Последний раз я сплавлялся по Чарыну.
The last time I kayaked down the Sharyn 6 years ago, the water level was at least 2 meters higher. It was even with the banks. All these islands were underwater. It's good that at least some water from the Sharyn flows into the Ili. Today, not all rivers originating in the northern Tian Shan reach the Ili, as many of them are drained to the last drop for irrigation. Many islands on the Ili have turned into peninsulas. Some branches dried up completely. The water level in others dropped. Preparing for the expedition, we carefully examined the information about the Ili's hydrological regime. It provides approximately 75% of the total water inflow into Lake Balkhash. Up until the 70s of the last century, the Ili's average annual discharge exceeded 22 cubic kilometers. During the filling of the Kapshagai reservoir, the runoff decreased by one-half. As a result, by 1985, the water in Balkhash fell to a critical level. 4 out of 9 lake systems in the Ili River delta dried up. Scientists and the government came to abandon the idea of filling the Kapshagai reservoir to the design capacity. Otherwise, Balkhash may have shared the fate of the Aral Sea. In the 90s of the last century, another high water cycle began, and the Ili's runoff once again came to 22 cubic kilometers. The water level started rising slowly. The natural transgression phase coincided with the reduction of irrigated agriculture area. The largest share of the Ili's discharge forms in the territory of the Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Region in China. Until the 90s of the last century, a little over 1 million people lived there, but over the years, its population and thus water intake have increased many-fold. The current Ili's runoff is much smaller than it was, and we are still to see how it will affect the Lake Balkhash basin and local communities. Optimists are comforted by the idea that the water level in Balkhash has been fluctuating for many centuries, and natural low water periods have been intermitting with high water phases. Pessimists recognize the existence of natural water cycles, but claim that human activities overlapping natural processes may bring unpredictable consequences. The Outdoor World team hopes that this extremely low water year will end and everything will be fine. Several kayaking routes exist along the Ili River, including a quite popular one from the Sharyn's mouth to the Singing Sand Dune. Its length is approximately 120 kilometers. Taking your time and enjoying the surroundings, you can cover this distance in 3 to 4 days. In a sports mode, 1 to 2 days will definitely suffice. Along the way, tourists can observe islands covered with dense Tugai jungle. From the right bank, there is a great view over the southwestern spurs of the Jatisu Alatau Range, the bright Aktau and Katutau mountains. And from the left bank, you can see the marvelous Boguti mountain range. Is rafting a form of environmental tourism? Without any shadow of doubt. Of course, under the condition that rafters don't trash their campsites, don't cut trees, and are careful with fire. Our journey along the Sharyn River has come to an end. We, and hopefully you, our dear viewers, have liked it so much that we decided to pay more attention to our graceful rivers. Kazakhstan has about 70,000 of large and small rivers. Each of them is a unique ecosystem with its own animal and plant worlds, its own story, inhabitants, as well as secrets and mysteries waiting to be revealed.